All right, folks, we got news today that's going to make your stomach drop. On one side of the world, Russia is collapsing into a food nightmare. 30 million people staring down starvation, shelves going empty, prices going through the roof. And the worst part, Vladimir Putin is sitting on mountains of grain, keeping it locked away, using food as a weapon. So while his own people can't even buy bread, he's storing food as weapon, weaponizing food while families are going hungry. Is that power or is that evil? I want to break that down for you guys. What exactly is happening over in Russia right now? But while Russia starves, look at what's happening right here in America. An activist judge has just ordered migrant jails emptied out. That's right, guys. The facility that they called Alligator Alcatraz is rapidly draining. Detainees cut in half in just a week, ICE handcuffed by the courts. Now think about that. 30 million people starving abroad, and we've got dangerous migrants that are just walking free here at home. You cannot make this stuff up, guys. And so this is where it gets even more outrageous. This isn't just a story about hunger or immigration. This is about leadership, about whether those who are in power care more about control and optics than they do about keeping people alive and keeping communities safe. So today, we're going to talk about why Putin is keeping food locked away while his own citizens are begging for potatoes. You can't even make this stuff up, guys. Why a radical judge would rather score political points and keep America secure. And of course, a shocking asylum case that Tom Homan says proves the whole system is rotten to the core. If you appreciate the updates, hit the like button and subscribe, because by the end of today, you're going to see exactly how these two crises are actually very connected and why they both come down to the same sick question. Will our leaders choose national power or human survival? So under President Donald J. Trump, let's go ahead and anchor ourselves right there, because today we're staring at two crises on opposite sides of the globe, but both actually have one chilling thing in common: leaders playing power games while ordinary people suffer. So in Russia, the shelves are going empty. 30 million people are at risk of starvation as food supplies vanish. And right here in America, an activist judge has just ordered migrant jails emptied out, undermining ICE and tying the hands of Trump's DHS. So don't miss this, guys. These are like two sides of the same coin here, if you will. They're connected with one ugly truth. When those who are in power treat survival skills like a bargaining chip, it's the people, not the elites, who end up paying the price. So let's go ahead and start with Russia. The so-called breadbasket of the world is now staring at bare, empty shelves. I'm talking potatoes, the staple of every Russian household. The food of soups, stews, and survival itself have jumped 167% in price in just 1 year. In some regions, prices have tripled. And it's not just potatoes, milk, bread, vegetables, they're all skyrocketing. Families who once bought a week's worth of groceries they're having to cut back to a single meal per day. Now, some parents are even skipping dinner altogether just so that their children can eat. Now, picture this. 1 week, you find a market stocked with fresh produce. The next week, those same store shelves are stripped bare. That unpredictability, this isn't just frustrating. This is driving panic. I mean, people hoard what little that they can afford, and that hoarding makes the shortages even worse. It's a vicious cycle. So here's the emotional reality that nobody in Moscow wants to admit. Imagine having to choose between feeding your kids or feeding yourself. This is what millions of Russian families are facing with right now, today, whenever you happen to be watching the show. But the question that you need to ask, and the one that I'm going to talk about in just a second, is this really just about bad weather, war, and sanctions, or is something much darker at play here? Because right now, Vladimir Putin is sitting on mountains and mountains of grain reserves, grain that could be used to ease the pain, but instead he's holding it back and he's selling it abroad. So this means that while Russian families are standing in line for a loaf of bread, Vladimir Putin is weaponizing food. He's using it as leverage, exporting it for cash and influence, all while his people starve. So I want to ask you directly, is it acceptable for a government to let its own citizens go hungry just to look strong on the world stage? And this is just one side of the story, because while Russia weaponizes food, right here at home, an activist judge just weaponized the law and emptied migrant jails. And that decision This could ultimately unleash consequences that we haven't even begun to see yet, guys. Now, picture this. You walk into your doctor's office, you hand them your Medicare card, and then suddenly you hear, sorry, we don't take your plan anymore. It happens every single day, folks. This is why so many people are calling Chapter. Their advisors double check your providers before surprises like this hit. Sharon Bertusik, she lived through that very same nightmare. But after she called Chapter, she found a plan that protected her doctors and her peace of mind. So here's the question. Do you want to wait until you get the shock at the doctor's office, or are you going to join thousands who have already prevented it? Now, most people are already calling the number at the bottom of your screen right now, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. It's a totally free phone call and service to the Ron Yates community. Tell them Ron says hello. Phone number is 909-563-8279. So let's get real here. The food crisis in Russia, it's not just bad luck. It isn't just climate change or sanctions. No, this is absolutely 100% deliberate. Right now, the Kremlin is sitting on massive grain reserves that were supposed to be used in times like this, when harvests collapse and families can't afford food. But instead of releasing it to feed their own people, Putin is hoarding it. Why? Because he's using food as a weapon. Think about that, right? Grain isn't just grain anymore. It's leverage. It's a bargaining chip. It's a bargaining chip to squeeze money out of foreign deals, to pressure other countries to play strongman on the global stage. So while Russian families are skipping meals, while kids are growing up malnourished, Putin is shipping food overseas so that he can line his pockets and buy influence. So here's the question that we have for you. Is it national power, or is it pure betrayal? Which is it? Because make no mistake, when leaders weaponize survival, it's always the innocent who pay the price. And so there's even more to the story, to be honest with you guys. I want to dig into what's really behind these shortages, because the collapse is far deeper than the headlines admit. Russia's farming backbone, it's breaking. It's breaking. They didn't want to admit this, but southern grain regions, they're getting scorched by record droughts. Siberia flooded, crops don't grow in chaos, and this climate instability has wiped out massive chunks of their harvest. And then sanctions hit. Western nations cut off high-yield seeds, fertilizers, and modern farming equipment. This means Russian farmers are planting less, they're harvesting less, and they're producing food with outdated tools. Production costs have also skyrocketed. Small family farms, they're drowning in debt. They're selling off their land to politically connected agriculture businesses. So now, not only is the harvest shrinking, but the entire food supply is consolidating into fewer and fewer hands, which makes the whole system even that much more fragile. And it doesn't even stop in the fields. Transportation is a nightmare, guys. Russia's rail network is in decline. Freight volumes are collapsing. Military shipments are being prioritized over food deliveries. Drone strikes and sabotage, they've targeted fuel tankers and supply chains. This means even when food is grown, it rots before it reaches the shelves. And then comes the rubble, also known as the ruble. So every dip, I call it the rubble because it's not very valuable, especially since the sanctions and essentially the US dollar has been relinquished from them. But every dip in Russia's currency makes imported essentials, fertilizers, packaging, spare parts. It makes all of that stuff more expensive. Bread, once the symbol of Russian stability, it's now turning into a luxury item. So let me ask you this, guys. When food costs more than rent, think about it. Food costs more than rent over there. Even when food costs more than rent, when the shelves are empty, when even potatoes are unaffordable, what happens to a society? Anybody have any guesses? We've seen this movie before. The Soviet Union collapses under the weight of food shortages. And now history is going to be repeating itself. So here's the kicker. When Russia is starving from within, the human cost is exploding. Families are rationing, protests are sparking, and the health of an entire nation is breaking down. But before we get to that, we got to turn back home because as Russia's shelves are empty, one American judge just emptied our migrant jails. And that decision, my friends, this is shaking Trump's border war in ways you can't even begin to imagine. So I want to talk about the human cost because behind every statistic, behind every chart of inflation and shortages, there's a family being crushed. 30 million Russians are now facing hunger. 30 million people. That's not a headline. It's like a humanitarian disaster. Food banks overwhelmed, shelves are empty, the villages, families are going back to barter systems, trading potatoes for flour, eggs for diesel fuel, because cash alone doesn't even cut it anymore. Parents are rationing meals. Mothers are skipping dinner so that their kids can eat. Children, they're growing up on nothing but starch-heavy diets, bread, potatoes, and cheap fats. And the doctors are already seeing the fallout. Anemia, vitamin deficiencies, delayed growth. This is a generation being weakened right before our very eyes. And the protests, they're already starting. Small, scattered, but they're growing because people remember. They remember Soviet era food lines, rationing cards, hunger being used as a weapon. And so when survival itself is on the line, frustration can turn into a revolution. But while Russia's families are being betrayed by their own leaders, we need to turn back home because here in the United States, betrayal is coming from a different place. It's coming from the courtroom. In Florida, the detention center nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz is collapsing. Just 1 week ago, it housed 400 detainees. Today, barely 180. Why? Because a single federal Judge Williams, decided it violated environmental laws and barred new detainees from being held there. Now, think about that. At the very moment that President Trump's DHS is cracking down on the border, arresting criminals and trying to keep communities safe, an activist judge swoops in to handcuff ICE. Overnight, detainees, populations cut in half, dangerous individuals shuffled around, or worse, released. And while DHS is scrambling to comply, Florida is already racing to build a backup, a new detention site called Deportation Depot. Deportation Depot. But ask yourself this, guys. Why should the state even have to do this? Like, why should activist judges have the power to empty out migrant jails while Trump's administration is trying to enforce the law? So here's a real question we have to wrestle with. Do you want unelected judges making immigration policy, or do you trust Trump's DHS to protect American communities? Because one side is focused on security, but the other side is more interested in scoring some political points. But here's where it gets even more explosive, because Tom Homan himself toured Alligator Alcatraz, and he says the judge's ruling wasn't just wrong, it was radical, it was unprecedented, and a direct assault on border security. And if that wasn't bad enough, we got a case study in asylum fraud so outrageous, it's gonna completely piss you off. So Tom Homan, he's seen it all. The man spent decades inside of ICE, and when he says something is unprecedented, you better believe it. So he toured Alligator Alcatraz personally. He walked through the hallways, he inspected the cells, talked to the medical staff, and what did he find? He found a clean, well-kept, fully functional facility. Doctors and nurses on site, a helicopter ready to transfer emergencies, waste management handled daily. Not the environmental disaster that the judge claimed, but a professional detention center doing its job. So why shut this thing down? Well, Tom Homan says that it's rather simple. It's politics. This wasn't about the environment. It was about kneecapping immigration enforcement under Trump. And here's the kicker. Tom Homan warns that this decision doesn't just close one facility. It actually sets the stage for a larger war on detention itself. And so while activist judges and politicians are playing games, ICE agents, they're still out there. They're risking their lives to remove these dangerous criminals. Tom Homan calls their work serious, dangerous, and done with integrity, dignity, and honor. Yet their biggest obstacle, it's not the cartels or the gangs. It's our own courts. And so this brings us straight into the story that really proves exactly why detention matters. His name is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because it should. He's been making headlines across the country. Recently, released from custody in Tennessee, Abrego Garcia is now applying for asylum. He says he fears being deported to Uganda. But let's cut through the smoke here, guys. The man's no refugee. He's been accused of being a gang member, a pedophile, a wife beater, and an alien smuggler. A walking rap sheet, guys. Yet instead of being deported, he's trying to twist asylum laws to stay in America. Now think about that. A system that's meant to protect genuine victims of persecution is now being exploited by violent offenders. Tom Homan's not having it. He said it flat out. If the court rules on the basis of law, he's going home. But he also warned if activist judges step in again, Garcia could slip through the cracks. So here's a question you need to answer. Should compassion allow criminals to stay, or should security come first? Because every time we let one of these cases like this drag out, we gamble with the safety of American communities. So here's the big eye opener, guys. While Trump's DHS and ICE are trying to keep America safe, California's leaders, they're actively fighting to shut them down. In fact, California Governor Gavin Newsom, he just accused ICE of becoming Trump's private police force. And what he said next is going to blow your mind. So let's zoom in on California, because if you want to see the clash between Trump's enforcement and Democratic resistance, there's no better example than this one. So since June, ICE and Border Patrol, they've arrested like 5,000 illegal aliens in Los Angeles alone. And we're not talking about people who are looking for work. We're talking about the worst of the worst. Multiple murderers, rapists, pedophiles. People who should never be walking free on American streets. But what happened the second that ICE got results? Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass demanded that they shut the operations down. And Governor Gavin Newsom, he went even further, accusing ICE of being the largest police force in the world and warning that Trump could use them at voting booths and polling places. Now, stop and think about that, guys. Trump's DHS is pulling violent criminals off the street, and instead of thanking them, Democrat leaders are smearing them, not because of the facts, but because they hate the president behind the policy. Now, Tom Homan didn't hold back. He called Newsom's remarks disgusting, and he said that the governor is an embarrassment, and he reminded everyone of one simple truth. Under Joe Biden, ICE was neutered. Nothing got done. But under President Trump, nearly 2,000 arrests and deportations. That's not politics. That's results. This is what keeps America safe. And so this kind of brings us full circle. Because whether we're talking about Russia's food crisis or America's border crisis, the pattern is the same. Leaders weaponizing survival itself. In Russia, Putin is letting families starve while hoarding grain for power and for profit. But here in America, activist judges and politicians, they're letting dangerous migrants loose. They're blocking Trump's efforts to keep our communities secure. Both crises come down to one chilling question. Will leaders protect people's survival, or will they sacrifice them for politics? Now, I want to hear from you guys. Do you stand with the national power games or with human survival? Should food be used as a weapon? Should asylum protect violent offenders? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below, guys, because this debate, it's far from over. This is about whether families eat. It's about whether our neighborhood stays safe. So, ladies and gentlemen, the stakes could not be higher. Like this video, share it with your friends, and let's make sure that you're still subscribed so that you never miss out on the truth that the media will not tell you, because the fight between power and survival, it's happening right now, and every one of us has to pick a side. We'll see you next time.